I grew up in southern Germany in a very small village and had a happy childhood roaming the woods. I spent my summers at my grandparents' farm learning about crops and animals, so nobody was surprised when in 5th grade I declared biology to be my favorite subject. However, in 10th grade the game changed. I learned about microbes, about how viruses and bacteria are all around us, in us, on us. Some of them can be harmful, others are good for us, and we actually need them. What is interesting about those things is that viruses, in particular, are not considered to be living. They are not part of the tree of life. Only bacteria, animals, plants, and fungi are, because they can replicate themselves. However, viruses cannot. Viruses are not considered to be living. They always need a host. And they can infect any life form on Earth, including plants and animals. I studied viruses throughout my degrees and ended up at the Biosafety Level 4 laboratory at the Rocky Mountain Labs. There, we study the really bad viruses, the ones where we have no treatments or vaccines for, and I love it. We are housed in this building, and we work in this laboratory. We look kind of funny because we have to wear this plastic bag. It's a suit, and we have external air support. But when you consider you're working with these pathogens that you can easily die of, you have no vaccine, no treatment, you have to be protected, and you have to focus. My work also allowed me to participate in the Ebola virus outbreak response from 2013 to 2016 that was going on in West Africa, particularly in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. The Ebola virus infected in April 2014 people in the counties depicted in orange. However, only 5 short months later, the virus had affected almost all the countries there. It was devastating, and these countries just came out of civil war and had basically no health infrastructure. So we teamed up with the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta and set out to support the Doctors Without Borders Ebola treatment unit in Monrovia, Liberia, which was basically a big tent city that allowed them to separate the infected people from the healthy and hopefully contain the virus so it wouldn't spread further and cause more harm. We also operated out of a tent. That was our diagnostic laboratory. It's a far cry from what you know here in the United States with fancy laboratories. We brought everything we needed from here and set it up. And believe it or not, it was very basic, but it worked. We helped diagnose those people. But boy, did we wish we would have had a treatment, because a treatment would have been good to help those people get better. What is important to know about treatments can only be given to people after they get sick. So we thought, well, maybe it would be even better to have something that would prevent them from getting sick. And a very big preventative that we are talking today is vaccines. Vaccines can be given to people before a disease or disaster strikes, and hopefully keep them safe and not ill. I want to talk to you today a little bit more about vaccines, what different kinds we have, and how they work. The first kind is what we call a live-attenuated vaccine. A prominent example for that is measles virus. How this works is people take in a laboratory or at a company measles virus from a human that got infected and passage it in cell culture many times. What happens in this process is that the virus loses its infectivity. So it's basically a weakened virus that still can infect you, but you're not getting sick. And that is what's being used as a measles virus vaccine right now. Another approach is what we call inactivated vaccines. Influenza virus vaccines is one of them. Here, people in the laboratory grow the virus and then chemically inactivate it. So the virus is basically non-infectious anymore, it's dead. It's also killed. And that gets injected into people. A third option is what is used for hepatitis B vaccination, called a subunit vaccine. There, in the laboratory, people take the virus apart and only engineer one part of it that will generate an immune response that will protect you. So that is just one part of the virus that is helping you there. Vaccines in the United States are tightly regulated by the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. And you can see here on these two lists several vaccines that have been licensed by companies that are for bacteria and toxins and viruses. And that is really important to know that the FDA really pays close attention to that. They always make sure every lot that's produced is safe in humans. So how do vaccines work? Just imagine you're going to Walgreens or any other pharmacy and get a flu shot. You get an injection in the upper arm, and then what happens there? Well, your body recruits cells to that spot. They come and take the particle apart, and they work together to generate an immune response. You might get some swelling and redness where you got the injection because your body is seeing something that is not normal. You might also get a fever, but that's a good thing because it says, hey, your body is doing its job. It's working to generate this immune response. An important part of this immune response are antibodies because they stay in your body for a while and keep the memory of the virus alive. So should you get an infection with influenza virus months after you got vaccinated, the body has these antibodies. They recognize the virus, bind it, and neutralize it, so you don't get sick. If you don't have enough antibodies, you might still get mildly sick, but probably not as bad that you have to go to a hospital. However, over the last 2 decades, vaccines have gotten a really bad reputation. Not just because we have those little adverse effects, pain at the site where you got the shot, or a little fever. No. Andrew Wakefield promoted the theory that vaccines cause autism. And that was a big tryout and led to a lot of vaccine hesitancy, as we refer to now, in the world. Not just in the United States, in the world. In the last 2 decades, though, a lot of companies, universities, and governments have conducted many studies and shown that this is just not true. Vaccines do not cause autism. Vaccines really do work. And the best example for that, and so far also the only one, is humans eradicated smallpox from this planet. Only the older ones among you probably remember what smallpox infections looked like in humans, because we didn't have one since the 1950s in this country. In 1967, the WHO started an eradication program that was declared to be successful and completed in 1980. So smallpox does not exist in this planet out in nature anymore. A similar attempt was made for polio and also for measles. For polio, we are close. Not quite there, but we're getting there. For measles, we were close, but we are far away again. So how do infectious diseases like measles, polio, and smallpox spread? Imagine in a classroom an event like today at a family reunion. You have people that are completely healthy and others that are immunocompromised. And immunocompromised just means that their immune system is not healthy enough to get vaccinated. Those can be newborn kids or people that take medication. Some people don't even know they are immunocompromised. And then, of course, older people. When an infected person comes in, the infection can spread quite tremendously, and everybody could get infected. Now, be aware that infection does not mean you get disease or even bad disease. Usually people develop a spectrum, like from the sniffles to a fever to being hospitalized. However, if there's nobody vaccinated and the infection can just roam through a population, we see serious complications, including death, particularly with those people that were immunocompromised. If you imagine this scenario in a healthy population that is also vaccinated, you only have the infected person, and the infection will spread to only a few. There's no serious complications or even death in this scenario if people are vaccinated. And this is a concept that in science we refer to as herd immunity. Herd immunity means we vaccinate everybody that can tolerate it and protect our weakest that cannot be vaccinated. You see here in this video shortly that if you have no people vaccinated in blue or 95% people vaccinated in yellow, the disease coming in from a person 0, like here in the black dot, spreads at different speed and to a very different degree. So herd immunity is really needed because what spreads with nobody being vaccinated like wildfire can be contained if even only 90 or 95% of the people are vaccinated. Now I want to bring this a little bit closer to Montana. Talking about measles, mumps, rubella vaccination coverage in kindergartners in this state. You can see that in 2014, 2015, we were at 95%, but ever since then, the blue has faded. And also the vaccination coverage rate in those kindergartners has. Right now, we are below the United States average. And that is really sad because particularly measles is not far in Seattle and Oregon, but people are not vaccinating. The biggest problem that Montana has in terms of vaccine coverage is religious exemptions. They are by law a thing, and that is very good. However, you have to realize that if you do not vaccinate your kid, not are you putting your kid at risk, but also others that might not be able to get the vaccine. And bringing this further home to this community in particular in Ravalli County, we are the lonesome leaders with almost 12% religious exemptions. When you think about the herd immunity, at 90% we are okay, below it's not, and there's also medical exemptions. So we have probably somewhere around 80 to 85% vaccine coverage in this school report. When we look particularly at certain schools in Ravalli County for the last school year, there's a clear correlation between MMR vaccination and religious exemptions. There's a couple places that are really compromising herd immunity, and not just in those schools, but in the entire communities, because those kids are representative of those communities. So keep in mind, when we only have 25% vaccinated or 50%, we get this rapid spread of the disease, serious complications, and even death. The overall coverage in Montana is just above what we see now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is a third world developing country in Africa. It's sad that we have to compare our county to this country. The vaccine coverage is pretty similar, and they have been dealing with the measles virus outbreak for the past year. They have over 6,000 fatalities. That's 2%. Just imagine that, it's 1 in 50. You may think, okay, measles, it's far away, it's on the West Coast, it's not going to come here. Well then, let's talk about something that is striking Montana every year, influenza virus. Influenza is very different from the common cold. The common cold is sniffles and cough, no fever. If you have influenza, you know, because you will be in bed, you have fever, chills, and you get tested. There's a drug that works, but only if you get it really early after you get symptomatic. So your best bet is the flu shot. Influenza in Montana strikes every year. The last flu season, 2018, 2019, there were over 5,000 cases. 767 people ended up in hospital, and 38 died. That is representative of the numbers for the entire United States, where about 34,000 people died of influenza. And if you think, oh, it's only affecting newborns or old people, think again, because even people in their 20s and 30s that work out in the gym and are healthy can be knocked out by flu. And this is also not just happening last year, it's happening every year. You see in blue here that the 3-year average tells us every year people in Montana get hospitalized and die of the flu. And again, it is happening in every age group, in the newborns, in the elderly, as well as in the people that are in their prime years. Influenza is one of the major burdens considered by the CDC in the healthcare system. Not only is it an emotional burden for a family, you have a sick family member, or you have to care for someone, you cannot go to work, you don't get paid, you don't have a paycheck, but also the healthcare cost, short-term and long-term, because there are complications with flu. So what can you do to improve the situation? Please go and get the flu shot. Vaccinate your children. Measles is really not an easy virus to contain. Beware of misinformation that's out there, particularly on social media. And do not hesitate with any question to reach out to doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, or even us, because we are happy to talk to you about it and educate you on vaccines, vaccination schedules, and what's good for you to protect your family and our community, the herd. Thank you.